Thank you.
Let's deal with the issue straight away about whether this budget benefited the low earners, middle income earners, or higher income earners. Sheila.
Mostly middle income earners, and particularly middle income employees rather than self-employed people. So if you look at the tables, generally middle income earners benefit. There's a little bit of progressivity on the lower end with universal social charge, so there's a certain amount of improvement there, but most of the benefit went to middle income and obviously higher income.
All right, so that again the priority wasn't given to people in low incomes.
No, not.
Jack, how do you feel about that?
I broadly go along with what Sheila has said. I would say that the emphasis has been on middle income people and people on the very low end. They're the two groups.
No, she didn't say that. She said the opposite.
No, actually, you said that before she said something else. But as far as I understand, I was sitting beside Sheila here, listening to what she said. The people who benefited most are the people for single people in the 32,000 to 70,000 bracket, or for married people or people in cohabiting relationships in the 42,000 to 70,000 bracket, and the people on incomes of up to 12,000 euro.
Better tell Jack again what you said.
No, they're the people who...
Jack, tell Jack again what you said.
Yeah, mostly middle income earners and obviously higher income earners. The people on lower incomes benefited less than middle income and
people on less than 12,000?
They benefited less. They have less money in their pockets as a result of this budget than people on middle income or higher income.
Oh yes, I quite agree, because
you said a moment ago the opposite.
No, I didn't. I said that the two categories were the middle income people and the people on below 12,000.
Yeah.
And now we're splitting hairs over whether it's relative or absolutely. But I just want to raise something else around rich people. Or people at the top end. The real way in which people at the top end benefited by this budget is not so much about how much more they got, because it's been somewhat offset by the clawback on the USC. But any budget which does not impose a wealth tax, and any budget which does not deal with the issue of the allowances which wealthy people enjoy, is a good budget for rich people, and we will continue.
And any budget that cuts the top rate of tax.
Yeah, well, that's to some extent clawed back. That's clawed back by the 1% on the USC. But we will continue to have a situation where rich people enjoy those kind of benefits for so long as the majority of our people are voting for the parties of the centre right, and that will continue.
Yeah, but one of the reasons for that is that people like you support those parties.
That I support those parties?
Yes, you support the Labour Party.
No, the parties of the centre right.
Yes, including the Labour Party.
No, the Labour Party isn't a party of the centre right.
Oh.
The Labour Party is a party of the left, all right, which has sacrificed itself to protect people to the degree that it's possible in circumstances where 60% of the people in the last election voted for the parties that guaranteed the rich that they would have to contribute nothing.
Nicola, the Labour Party has protected people that would have done even worse had the Labour Party not been in government.
The Labour Party have betrayed the electorate that put their faith in them, that once they got into government there would be there'd be a break on Fine Gael, there'd be a fairer... having Labour in government would mean fairer outcomes over the term of their in power, but they have absolutely betrayed working people. And I do think that, you even see it on the marches now, Labour are a target because we instinctively look to them to defend us, and they have let us down big time. I mean, this is not a progressive budget by any standard. When Joan Burton was saying that she wants to move away from lower income tax, that's the only progressive measure we have, that those that have more pay more. These stealth taxes, the universal social charge coming in at 12,000, it'll only offset what somebody will end up having to pay in the stealth taxes of the property tax and the water tax. There's nothing here, only crumbs, little crumbs. And there's certainly nothing here that looks like a recovery for most people. The only recovery I've seen is on Saturday, when people were out 100,000 people out on the streets. They've recovered their dignity and their pride. They have channeled their anger into something powerful and positive, people power, and they were out there on the streets, and they're going to keep going until we defeat water taxes and let the out-of-touch politicians know what it's like to be on the margins and struggling. We've had enough. 7 austerity budgets, and
I
this
want to
is
go
the
to
give back.
Mary Lou MacDonald, go to Michael Taft. That in the Irish Examiner tomorrow morning, I think we can put the front page up on screen, can we? It says, beginning of the end for austerity. Next time, next 3 budgets to help squeeze middle. Opposition criticises looming water charges. Do you think this is the beginning of the end of austerity?
No, and the government today published the information about how they see public expenditure evolving up to 2018. And what they project is that public expenditure will be cut by nearly 10% in real terms, and that means after inflation. So what we will get is austerity below the radar. Previously, for the last 6 years, we've had ministers stand up at budgets and saying we're announcing actual spending cuts or tax increases. Now what they will do is they will use inflation to squeeze public spending. 1 out of every €10 will be lost. That will be lost to schools, hospitals, SNAs, they will lost home helps to a lot of services. So that will be squeezed.
Inflation is almost zero.
No, inflation will be running this is just the government's projection, so this is what they've published, that inflation will run in total about 6% up to 2018. They expect it to be 1.5% this year. So it's in the tables. I mean, to be fair to the government, they have given this information out. They've also stated that they will really cut investment. And investment is a key driver in terms of creating a productive economy and driving economic growth. They're going to cut that by over 20%.
But they've already had great success in creating jobs, and they're saying today that they have further success in job creation.
Well, I hope they will have further success in job creation, but in the first half of this year, only 5,500 jobs were created. That is statistically insignificant. Many of those jobs were created on scheme work. Other jobs were created in part of what you would call the precarious work situation, where people are working part-time or they don't know how many hours they're going to work from one week or the next. The 5,500 is not a very strong performance. And that's coupled with the fact that over the last year, wages and incomes have fallen against inflation.
Okay, Mary Rose, what did you think of the budget?
After 7 years of tough budgets, it's good to see this year an expansionary budget. I think it's the right call at this stage, particularly in light of some of the challenges in Europe. I think overall it's a job-creating budget, and it's good for business. It's good for business creating jobs, getting more people back to work, and it'll stimulate domestic demand. We see more money going back into people's spending power, about half a billion in additional spending power, and that'll drive domestic demand and also create more growth in jobs. So I think overall, considering the constraints facing the government, I think it was a reasonable, pragmatic budget.
Okay, John Bissett, Mary Rose said this is a good budget, it stimulates the economy, it's a job creation budget and something to be welcomed.
Excuse me. One of the things when I was coming on the show tonight was to think about how do you assess a budget like this? What sort of framework do you use? And one of the key questions for me is how does it contribute to changing the structures of inequality in Irish society? Which is a question that doesn't seem to concern the government to any great degree. It seems to be business as usual. Whereas one of the things that I think is really important, that we think about questions of economic equality in this country as opposed to continuing the same old patterns. We've had 7 years of austerity. It's really been a project of the maintenance and restoration of class power, of small groups of people who have benefited from that austerity programs. The media, or sections of the media, has colluded in that process over that time. And I think the budget today is, with one or two minor exceptions, a continuation of that process. I think you're right in relation to the the fine detail. I think Pascal's comments about the percentage redistribution of wealth are nonsense, to be honest with you. I think what it's really about here is fundamental net wealth in this country and how that gets redistributed. I think we had an opportunity to do something fundamental in the budget in terms of redistributing the wealth, but the parties in power decided not to think that that was that important and have continued to a great extent. I think one of the key things in the budget today, a couple, is the housing proposals. So they're proposing 500 million next year and in the following 2 years, which will roughly get us 2,500 houses in each of those years. We have 92,000 people on the waiting list, and that doesn't say anything about people in rented accommodation, people who are in mortgage debt who are losing their houses. So for the government to come out with guns blazing today, pronouncing that they are going to solve the housing crisis, it's a drop in the ocean.
Okay.
We need much more serious proposals. We need something significant.
Okay, I'll go to John McGuckin in a moment, but just before I do, John, the reality is, however, that this government, and they've made a big, they've been quite bullish about this, got us out of the bailout arrangement, that the fiscal crisis that we got into in 2008 has been largely resolved. There's still a debt problem, okay, but there's still significant progress that's been made and there's growth in the economy.
I think the debt question is a critical issue. Next year we will pay $8 billion in interest alone on our debt. I think people forget that there's been a real high level of propaganda around what happened to the Anglo bonds, for instance. We still have to pay a principal sum of 25 billion euros on the Anglo debt. Next year we will pay, of the 8 billion in interest we will pay next year, 2 billion of that is our interest repayments on the debt, on the bank debt. Now, when we talk about the savings from the budget today, and the government making those statements, that's not even in the equation. So when we think long term about the state of our economy and the cost that we've taken on in relation to that, it's enormous.
Okay, John, what do you think of the budget?
I think it's interesting that we have a budget where pretty much everyone in the country got something, and pretty much everyone who's spoken on the panel, bar one speaker so far, has something to object to, which tells you that really this was a budget for Fine Gael and Labour, entirely targeted at the next election, not really targeted at economic growth, economic sustainability, or improving the lot of anybody, bar their fondness towards the two parties in power.
But the fact is that we do have economic growth now, both GDP and GNP growth, and the ESRI is projecting continuing growth in the next several years.
And we also have a significant and a huge debt that needs to be paid down, and we also are still running a current budget deficit. And I think it's interesting that if you were to go back and look at shows like this from 2002, 2003, 2004, I think a lot of the things that would be being said then about budgets that were expansionary from certain elements will be the same things that are being said today. And then when the bust happens in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, it'll be the same people sitting here today kind of going, the government should have spent billions more, who will be saying, we had nothing to do with wrecking the economy. Because ultimately what we've seen today is a government abandon a strategy of fiscal prudence in order to buy votes. And I don't think anybody in the country would say this is... Here's the thing, Vincent.
That formal austerity should have persisted. That's
I think you go out there onto the street, you talk to a rich person, you talk to a poor person, you talk to anybody in the country, asking a voter, will this budget make an appreciable difference to your life? Are you much better off than you were yesterday? And unless they happen to be a smoker, in which case they'll say they're much worse off, most people say they're not really better or worse off at all. This is entirely about improving the political position of Fine Gael and Labour, and they're using the people's own money and some extra money they borrowed from the Germans to try and buy their votes. And I, for one, would hope that the Irish people aren't that cheap.
Okay, Rita.
Well, I don't often find myself agreeing with John at all, but I do agree that this budget is about the buy-in between Labour and Fine Gael of people's votes. It felt like there's something for everyone in the audience today as I listened to it. Now, I don't have a problem that the very squeezed middle, because there are some people who have been going over the cliff and that got something. But I do, Vincent, have a problem with those in the higher earners in benefit. And as you said a few minutes ago, I think when you, again, come back to that voting, when you look at how they looked at the older people, because the older people has a vote, a grey vote, and they will use, and they have used on the water charges there the week, but they chose to give them 25, a quarter of the Christmas bonus, when they didn't look at, when maybe they would give them back their 6 weeks fuel allowance. That would prevent some old people from sitting with blankets on them. They've made choices in the budget, given 20% of your tax around water charges, or something in terms of welfare around that, is not going to push that 100,000 people that came to the streets last Saturday. And I'm telling you, Vincent, from being on the streets, that was a different buzz. There's a different thing going on in this society. People are finding their feet. People will come out on the 4th of November, and that water charge has to be abolished. And just to say on the other thing in terms of poor, and that austerity is gone. Austerity is in no way gone. There will still be people sitting in the communities where I work, choosing whether they have heating on Thursday and Friday, or lights on Monday and Tuesday, or what food or what dinner house they'll go to. So they needn't try to propaganda us that austerity is gone. Austerity is embedded, and the damage that austerity has done to our society is shocking. And Howland today came out and said, we're looking at economics and we're looking at society. Well, they very, very little looked at society, but that people that were on them streets last Saturday are going to keep on marching, and they're going to build up a big movement that's going to put them out, and we'll have to get something new it.
I think for most people it's relief. I suppose it's hard to complain. Everybody gets a bit. For 7 years we've had cuts, we've had austerity, and people are just happy that stopped. I think when people examine the detail of this budget, when they go forward, they'll then see that really very little has been done. And if this government is going to do what it says it does, which is new politics, moving forward, making sure we don't go through boom and bust cycles again, today wasn't the start of that. For us who work with marginalised older people, what we're interested in is that 1 in 5 older people are on the deprivation index, and they get £1.30, right? So are we determined to take all the people in all of the generations out of deprivation and out of poverty, and have a fairer share and better services? Or are we going to just do the same thing again, which is just spread around and make decisions based on politics and short-termism? Or are we going to plan a future and create a vision for people old, young, and in the middle?
Carl, what do you think of the budget?
Normally on budget day I lock the door and turn off the lights and, you know, come out the next day and hear the bad news. I thought this one wasn't so bad. People are always going to complain about the budget, no matter if you gave poor folks all the money in the world or taxed the rich at 100%. Someone somewhere is always going to have a gripe about it.
The rich would complain, I assume.
I'm saying someone somewhere will always have something bad to say about it. I think in balance, that we've seen that austerity is effective. It's not nice, but it works. And we're coming out the other side of it.
What way does it work?
It gets the house back in order. I mean, I'm surrounded by the pinkos, and they're not going to say that that's the case, but it works.
Affecting lower income earners to put the house in order.
Well, I think that if you were to just say, look, we're going to get everyone, irrespective of, you know, what they do above a certain wage, and just go after them, it kind of ignores things like how many hours do they work, what's their productivity. Like, you can't get into a space where you think that someone is morally correct because they're low paid and that someone is morally wrong because they're high paid. You could have someone who's
morality.
Well, because a lot of taxation is framed around these emotional arguments rather than actual numerical understanding of it.
Part of the
if someone is a consultant and they're out saving lives, are you saying that they're like
money? And there's nothing to do with morality. You target people who have money you can afford to pay.
For instance, look at the situation we're at with consultants now. People are saying, oh, consultants should be paid more than $95,000 a year, and you can have an agreement or disagreement. They're out saving lives every day. And yet if someone said, what's my life worth, they'd probably claim it's worth loads.
Hospital consultants. I thought you were talking to the Irish water consultants.
And so the fire,
The new word is prudent. This is the new word that's saying that everyone is prudent.
Are you against prudent?
Prudent this and prudent that.
Are you against prudence?
I can tell you the poor are very prudent. The poor wake up in the morning and they don't get to plan for the rest of the year or for 6 months. They plan for the day, they plan for the week. They're very prudent. They manage very small amounts of money. And I don't know that people, they probably don't walk in the communities where we live or where we work. But people have really hurt in those places, and that middle income group have really hurt. So people are well prudent.
Yeah, but the thing about prudence, and I know we agreed earlier, and I knew it wouldn't last. But the thing about prudence is, I mean, there are people out there who work every day, don't see their kids from 9 to 5, pay their wages, earn their wages, pay their taxes, struggle to buy kids presents for their kids at Christmas, and then turn around and wonder why somebody who doesn't work is getting a Christmas bonus from the state. Those people say, Prudence isn't giving away my money
There's no
when I work.
getting a Christmas bonus from the state. The bonus was taken away a long time ago.
No.
And there are people
hold on a second.
who may not have education
you can't say,
that don't get, jobs.
You can't say nobody is getting a Christmas bonus from the state just because they stopped giving it for a few years and now they're giving it back. A bonus is still a bonus.
A little €50 that will go on water charges.
Actually, it's a free water budget in that respect, because if you have a job, almost at any level of income, you'll recoup what the flat rate is in many cases.
You don't
so
if you're not paying tax.
John,
so if you don't pay tax, if you contribute nothing,
people speculate on how it is that the Irish populace has been sullen with regard to the austerity that is imposed on a lot of low-income and middle-income people over the last several years. And unlike places like Greece or France and many other places, there were no mass protests. And the people have speculated that the reason for that in part has been the failure of the trade union movement to get behind campaigns to do something about austerity, to do something about the unfairness of targeting low and middle income people for austerity. What do you got to say to that?
Well, the trade union movement was led or supported all the campaigns that have developed over the last 6 years around these issues.
You weren't there on Saturday, Jack?
No, except Saturday.
But
there were many.
The lost opportunity on Saturday.
Why weren't you there on Saturday?
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Can I say?
Yes, sure.
There were a number of unions who lead that right to water campaign.
United Trade Unions, for instance.
The reason why we were not there on Saturday was because we have spent quite a long period throughout this year lobbying to bring about a refundable water tax credit, which we had hoped would be equal to cover the cost of the amount of water people require to meet their normal needs.
You've clearly failed in that.
And what happened today represents, in our view, the right approach, but it is not adequate to meet that. Now, just one thing. Sorry. Can I just say something? Because I've been trying to say it all night.
Okay,
you must let me say what I came here to say, right? We've all sorts of differences here on the left, and contrary to what people say, I am actually on the left. I aspire to a fundamental redistribution of wealth in this country. But the only way that we will achieve it, and actually I think there's a possibility of achieving it, it's an outside possibility, but it's nonetheless worth trying to do, is if the people on the left stop gutting each other and develop a degree of political cohesion.
You mean people before profit in the Socialist Party?
I'm just talking about people on the left.
Yeah,
right.
Who else?
Let's stop being divisive for a second and develop a degree of cohesion and a political programme that addresses the issues which are not just about what we're against, but about what we are for, and addresses the way in which, on foot of a redistribution of wealth, we will develop the dynamic economy which will actually create wealth. And as long as our politics on the left are only about what we are against, we will continue to get majorities of the people voting for the centre-right parties, and we will continue to blame each other for what went wrong.
Harry, before immediately in the aftermath of the European elections and the by-elections that occurred then, there was a change of leadership in the Labour Party, and it was believed that the Labour Party had to get something substantial out of the forthcoming budget to recover the position that it was in. Has it done that?
It's achieved something today, but I think any achievement today would be relatively minor or marginal in the overall context of things. If you look at the budget, look at the good things about the budget. For the first time in 7 years, the adjustments were on the positive side rather than on the negative side. The spend exceeded the cuts by €1 billion when you take in 580 on the tax side and then over 400 million on the spending side. We have growth this year of 4.8%. But the choices the government made in relation to the way in which that money was spent on first viewing, it seems to favour Fine Gael slightly more than Labour, in my estimation, because if you look at the income tax changes, those who have benefited most, and Michael Noonan made no apology about saying this tonight, were those in the 30 to 70,000 euro per annum bracket, what he described as a squeezed middle. And it was the first time I've heard him say that on the record, that these were the people that they were focusing on, what he described as the coping classes. And if you do look in, Jack had an argument about relative and absolute terms, but say a family with one income, a couple with one income and 2 children.
Ireland. Rain, grass, fences. Our chickens. Vegetables.
Where somebody on 70,000 would have benefited to 770, to the tune of 777.
1,000 euros, yeah.
Well, 777 based on the tables that they provided today. Now, Jack made the reference...
I'm sorry, we've got to come up to a break in a moment. But after the European elections and the by-elections of last May, there was an apprehension in the Labour Party it would be annihilated in the next general election, and that something radical needs to be done. Is what was done today in the budget in any way adequate to save Labour from annihilation?
I don't think what happened in the budget today will benefit Fine Gael or Labour to any appreciable extent. We'll have to see what they do in the budget next year. When you look at what the Labour Party did, they put a lot of their political stock into this housing stimulus, a social housing stimulus plan, which will be announced next week. And that, they say, that will create 10,000 houses between now and 2018. We'll just have to look at the details of that to see if that will prove to be the case. And then there were marginal benefits. The living alone allowance, for example, there were small increases in that.
The Quango is going to get a subsidy of €100. Irish Water, this Quango, will now, for low-income people, will get €100 subsidy paid directly to them.
But I think the way in which I think that the principle of water charges is a good one in principle. I think the way in which it was introduced is wrong.
We've got to go to a break. After the break, we'll continue the discussion on today's budget and also look at how tomorrow morning's newspapers are reporting on
of both taxes, because they broaden the tax base, they dampen the property market to some extent, and in relation to water charges you get the kind of the polluter pays principle coming into effect. I think the government has mishandled the way in which they
on emphasis on the
of jobs
is better. We beat austerity and get result in Germany. In the Irish Daily Star, payback, child benefit up 5.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people in the middle are better off. I'm probably better off if people have got €5 more in their pockets. You wouldn't be in the
middle now, you'd be in the top bracket.
No, sadly I'd be in the middle. But but the choices that are made there, by increasing...
Your friend Jack, yeah.
I don't know what Jack's income is, actually.
I'm paid €108,385.
Yeah, you're in the top bracket.
Yeah. And everyone knows what I'm paid. Everyone.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Everyone knows what I'm paid.
But in making choices like that...
We'll both go on the left for that one.
Yeah. But making a choice like that gives more money to people in the middle means... Like, one group of people who are really missing from this is younger people, 18 to 24, who got really badly attacked in the last budget in terms of only having €100 of job seekers allowance. And you would think, rather than increasing child benefit, you could put something in place for them, for pathways to education, something for access offices, the 3rd level, something for training for that group.
Mary Rose, do you go along with the newspapers? They seem to think it's a great budget.
The really important thing out of this budget is recognising that we've come back into a period of growth. We're going to end up this year with over 6% growth, and it's that economic growth that's allowing government to now look at redistribution, to look at spending. We have an expansionary budget a year ahead of when we thought we would have. We're going to come well under the deficit targets next year, even with the spending that's in here. And there's potential for real growth in the economy over the next number of years. The biggest way to deal with some of the issues around young people, and that is keep going with stimulating the economy, get more growth back in. Too many people unemployed. The best way to lift people out of that poverty is get people back into jobs. This is a business-friendly budget, and it'll help business create more jobs.
Michael, a lot of people like you were saying that this austerity thing wouldn't work, that we wouldn't get out of the bailout, that another bailout would be required, this was disastrous, but it's proved not to be disastrous. Whatever you think about the fairness of the policies pursued, the fact is they've been effective.
No, they have not been effective. I think that the Irish case of fiscal consolidation will become a case study in universities in Europe and North America as probably an example of the most inefficient, wasteful and incompetent way to repair public finances. We have carpet-bombed the economy with over 30 to 35 billion euros of spending cuts and tax increases. That austerity is going to continue, though it's going to continue under the radar. We have carved out our productive economy. We can talk about growth rates of 4 or 5 or 6%. But I wish people, when they actually, quote the central bank's growth rates or the ESR's growth rates, they actually read the full report. Because in them, they qualify that heavily. They say that there's a number of indicators that they cannot be sure of. Yeah. There's a number of factors they can't be sure of. We've got national...
But taking those factors into account, they still say that, look, it looks good for the next several years.
Well, that's fine. I think that these kind of headlines in the newspapers is part of a general detachment from most people's real-life experience. When people hear ministers and government TDs coming on and talking about how all this is going to make it better, then they read that in the newspaper, and then sometime about March or April or May, people will be wondering, well, why is it that I didn't feel that in my pocket? Why is it being eaten away by price rises?
People who get jobs won't feel that, will know why things have improved for them.
That's correct, yes, but we are certainly going to have to dramatically improve on the 5,500 employment growth. We are going to have to dramatically improve on restoring people's incomes. I mean, for just one example, you would have to increase social protection payments by €24 a week just to restore them back to 2009 levels. We've got social housing crisis, we have a childcare crisis, we have a crisis in terms of pensions, and now we have a crisis in the Irish Water Company. We have a crisis water charges, and I just make this small point because it hasn't it hasn't featured much. But you know, we have these water charges. Now we have social protection payments that will provide €100 for those on social protection, and we have a water credit which will reduce people's water bill by 20% up to €100. The problem is that this means that there are hundreds of thousands of low-paid people whose income is not high enough to be in the tax threshold, but who are not on social protection. They will get no benefit at all from the measures outlined today. So what will happen is that any of the gains, and there's very few gains, but any of the gains will be wiped out by water charges. Many people will not receive any of the benefits. Okay. And the best solution for that is just to abolish them.
I think that on budget day, people they always feel outraged. It always seems to be one direction for the most part, but that we've seen a bit of help for middle earners who are average. I think if you look at people who are on the average wage, and they do represent the average, they've come out of this a little bit better. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, just being a normal person and being a little better off, that's not a bad thing. I think people should stop bitching about that. And if you say that, you know, the poor aren't being helped, there was just an announcement of $2.2 billion for social housing, specifically for people who have housing shortages. And on youth unemployment, another huge issue, there's meant to be a youth guarantee scheme for people below the age of 25 to try and help them get into work, have guaranteed work. So you're doing things, but there's this view that if it doesn't work right now, that it's a failure. If it doesn't work within the next 10 minutes, that's it, everything was for nothing. It takes time. We've come from a horrible situation, and we are getting better. And I hate to you know, maybe be the ray of light in an otherwise room full of storm clouds, but this is what recovery feels like.
Okay, I want to go to one of the storm clouds.
Yeah, Nicola. Cloud. 2,500 houses. And we have 100 a week in Dunleary Rathdown families applying for social housing. So you're not even going to
7,500
no,
by next year.
2,500 for this year. You're not even going to meet the demand, the extra people coming on. You've 7 a day presenting homeless, and to say that I've lost my train of thought now because he interrupted me. It's the same, like with the SNAs, you know, they're going to lift the recruitment embargo and take on special needs assistants and resource teachers, but that doesn't take account that they hammered it at 15% cut since 2009. Michael's hit the nail on the head. You have to think how much they decimated it, so these few crumbs aren't going to go anywhere to give anybody relief. And you're saying that it's, you know, nice people, ordinary people. We're talking about people that are literally on the margins.
There was no money in 2009.
There was money, choices.
Money.
And a financial transaction tax was recommended by the OECD.
But that wouldn't have been the panacea. It would not have been
320 million. It would have been something towards, for example,
but there are loads of somethings. I mean, you have to put this budget into perspective.
Yes, but a water tax will take 350 million. That just don't exist. It does exist. A financial transaction tax will give you the same as the water tax. So why do we choose one over the other?
Yeah,
why are they untouchable?
You're identifying a myriad of issues.
No, I'm not.
I'm
saying there's a choice.
You're talking about SNAs as well.
No, I said the SNA relief today that they will give new supports to SNAs will not even match what they cut.
Which transaction?
Do you understand? The same with the health budget. 50 million cut from the mental health budget.
Sure.
They've given nothing back there. So you're not getting it. You want us to feel better.
I mean, you do have to have a sense of perspective and realism about what can be achieved.
A real sense of perspective. And I think corporation tax at 12.5% would be a real achievement. 3.6
Another cloud behind you, Harry, wants to have a go at you.
Sorry.
I just want to say that, you know, I'm in solidarity with all those people who are over the edge in terms of Middle Ireland, and I'd be very much supportive of them. But I want to come back to that. It is a good news story that social housing is going to be back on the agenda again, that they shouldn't have ever stopped building social housing. But they have identified 3 ways of doing it. One is the direct way, that maybe will come in on time, on budget. Yeah. The second one they're after talking about is public-private partnership, and the third is housing associations. And may I say, after 16 years of the struggle in St Michael's Estate and being let down in terms of public-private partnership, I do think that the state has to think about this one, because I don't believe that the way to build social housing when it's for need and not for profit is through a public-private partnership.
Okay, Jack, yeah.
On the front pages of the papers, they're overstating it. There's a degree of hyperbole there. The thing about the budget is that there was a few good things in it. There were small steps in the right direction. You could argue over all the other things that could have been done. But the fact of the matter is that there are small steps. I think that the big thing that could have been done, that was missed, was something significant could have been done on the issue of water charges, around that tax credit thing, which would have gone a good way to healing the divisions in our society, and it's a great pity that they didn't take the opportunity to do it. But one other thing, in relation to your discussion with Michael about the austerity, there's an assertion being made that the reason why we're experiencing a degree of a recovery is because of the austerity. That's utterly.
The government says. That's what your friends in the Labour Party are saying.
I'm not so sure they are, but it's not correct, because the reason why we're experiencing a degree of a recovery is on the back of what has happened in the US economy, and on the back of the British economy, and on the back of that 12.5% corporation tax rate. Because if Barack Obama and the British Tory government, for all their faults, and the Chinese Communist government had followed the same policies as Angela Merkel is inflicting on Europe, we'd be in the Stone Age by now.
John, let John in quickly.
The British Tory party did, first of all, and secondly, I find it interesting that did follow an austerity path, which they're widely reviled. But I find it interesting that now several years.
Quantitative easing as well. I find it interesting
I find it interesting, Jack, that several years on from 2008, when everything was Fianna Fáil's fault and any argument they might have made about the American economy being influential was washed away by people in situ and on the left in general, that you're now suddenly turning back to that. But hold on a second. Hold on a second. And I'm actually going to make a point, Jack, in your favour here, because I've heard a lot about things that are being spent, or things that should be spent, or the 2.2 thousand million euros for housing for 2,500 houses isn't enough, and we should spend more on that. Yeah. And I'd like to know who should pay for it, because if Jack, in his defence, moved to London and earned his 108 to 110 grand there, he'd be paying €9,000 less in tax per year. Anybody who knows there are young graduates who left this country who are now working in places like London or in Australia or in Canada, who are looking at the jobs that are coming in here in areas like accounting and engineering and medicine. Ask junior doctors about this, and they will tell you there's no chance I'm coming back home to pay those marginal tax rates, when the tax rates we're paying in London or Canada or Australia are roughly netting us 9 to 10 grand a year more than we would. That's just a fact. And the idea that, I mean, I'd like to know, I'd like to ask.
Why should we care?
Hold on a second. They're bondholders. Hold on a second. No. You keep talking too. Here's a question for you. 2.2 billion in social housing. 2,500 houses. You say it's not enough. How much? How many houses?
Walk through the streets of Dublin and see how many houses
who pays for it?
How many houses who pays for it? Can I just put a general question, John?
92,000 houses.
92,000 around.
How much will it cost? Who pays for it?
It's a drop.
Okay.
How much will it cost?
John, can I just put a point that's made by Peter McVerry in regard to this? And it is, isn't it odd that getting rid of a few traffic lights out and around Newlands Cross took precedence, took priority over the provision of social housing over the last few years? Isn't there something bizarre about that?
I agree. I'm absolutely in favour of the social housing programme.
It isn't that we don't have money, it's that we have different priorities. That's the issue, isn't it?
I absolutely. I mean, look. I'm a driver, Vincent. That specific example I know all too well. The fact is that and anyone who drives around the roads of this country today, I make this point every year at budget time. You drive around this country at this time of the year, you will see roadworks in every county, in every town. Do you know why that is? It's because the councils have to spend the budgets now, because if they don't spend all the money they have doing work that doesn't have to be done, they don't get the same money.
Just to reiterate the point again, does the government have any broader vision for this society? I don't think it does have a broader vision. It doesn't have any sense of where do we want to get to. It's piecemeal. In the sense of that doesn't exist. What it's really doing is feeding to its populations, its electorate, it's feeding to the middle classes explicitly today. So there isn't a sense of we actually need to radically change the structure here, and we need to do something radically different. And I think that's what's missing from the debate. And I think we need to put that broader frame around these conversations when we analyse budgets like today.
Every time I hear the word vision, I think a knock. We're going to take a break, and after the break we'll have more visions. Join us then. Adam Harley says Rita should be aware additional €100 provided to a household benefits package will also cover the full allowance. Will now also cover fuel allowance recipients. Shay says not one job is being created to fix the 55,000 kilometres of pipes leaking 46% of the water. David Smith says those who have more save more. That's the Fine Gael way, and now that's the Labour way too. Catherine says why on earth add £5 child benefit? Why not subsidise childcare? Francis Byrne says only those of us lucky enough to have a job paid towards social welfare, and we deeply resent the partial reinstatement of the Christmas bonus. That's the way it is. And you want to make, Nicola, a point?
No, I'm just saying that this level of inequality, we were talking about inequality and egalitarian outcomes. This level of inequality.
We were talking about that during the break.
Oh, so sorry. What was the other thing? No, just, that it was a bad budget for well, I want to finish that point, that it doesn't benefit anybody in society to have this level of inequality. You're talking about competitive edges and inequality is good to drive everybody forward, to strive.
Again,
you're trying to get back to...
Why we shouldn't ever talk during ad breaks, because people reply to points made during the ad break.
Why can't we have an empathetic society? Why can't we have a caring society that isn't so hostile about those at the bottom? A lot of those at the bottom don't start on the same footings as most who go to Clongowes and all them. Some children leave school at 12-year-old. Some children are left on the streets. This society...
Peter McVerry went to Clongowes, by the way.
Yeah, well, he made a choice, didn't he, about how to be. He embraces people. Why can't we embrace the people at the very bottom and be okay about it?
The vast majority of people vote for parties that don't go along with your idea on this. That's the way it is.
But surely the parties have to have some basic thing of human rights, the right to housing, the right to education, the right to live.
It's the people. There isn't a consensus in our society to go in the direction you're talking about. And very few people argue, try to persuade people to that.
The vast majority, so hang on a second. The vast majority of people in this country do care about other people. The vast majority of people in this country, if they have anything to spare and they have somebody they know who is in need, will help them. I firmly believe that. What they don't do, and what they don't agree with you on, is the idea that charity or being kind means letting the government take money off you and give it to somebody else. Because, first of all, look at its record in spending money. We just discussed about that. I mean, how do I know when I hand over an extra euro in tax that it's going to somebody in need, or it's going to dig the traffic lights out of the motorways, as you said? I do know, if I hand that money over myself, that it's making a real difference. And the idea that just because we don't pay enough in tax, in your eyes, doesn't mean that we're not a caring society, I find to be frankly ludicrous.
Inequality costs the society in terms of crime, homelessness, ill health. Poverty causes stress and trying to manage. You get sick, you're stressed out, family relationships breaking up, and then we end up paying for hospital care, prison, you know.
The question that should be addressed is as to why it is that, given that we do probably have a majority in our society of people who do care, and given that it makes good sense to have a cohesive and reasonably equal society, that we always end up with a situation in which the majority of the people vote for the parties which don't favour that. The reason, sorry, no, it's not what people want. The reason, you're shouting me. Why don't you allow me to finish? You challenged me earlier about right. I know that you are. It appears, but just the thing about it is it's because the people on the left are not thus far able to present a cohesive alternative, and because they spend so much time gutting each other.
We're going to have politicians also going to play some of the debates in the Dáil today, and some of the speeches are really good. That's it for now.